Good morning. My name's Ehsan Gul, and I'm standing in for Alex Beatty, and I'm pleased to be talking to Ehsan Gul.
Hi, Henry.
I am very pleased to be talking to Ehsan, who is Head of Experimentation at UNDP Pakistan, which I think is sounds an absolutely fantastic job, and is working to find innovative ways to address the climate challenge within a development context. And my name is Henry Lusengore, and I am founder and CEO of PEP and a policy person, and I'll really enjoy asking questions of Ehsan, but hopefully we'll also have questions from other people watching. So first off, Ehsan, you're going to give a presentation, so I'll hand over to you.
Sure. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's listening me from multiple ends of the world. When Henry reached out for the session, I was thinking that what can the young people learn from us who are trying to work in the development space or trying to tackle these wicked development challenges, which is changing at a larger pace or a rapid pace right in front of our eyes. We get up every day, we hear about these different climate calamities happening, natural disasters happening, war happening, information technology challenges happening. So, how do we keep up with the pace of solving these challenges? Of course, we cannot do all, but we really need to start thinking about that single point solutions are no more the required solution to these problems. We might have to think differently. We might have to think it from multiple angles. Hence, we'll try to introduce you today to concept of portfolio logic, or looking at things from multiple angles or multiple solutions, trying to solve these problems. So when I was trying to look at this reality, that pre-COVID or the post-COVID-19 reality, the strategic risks have increased uh, in a multitude level. The current practice or the current pace at which we're trying to solve the problems is still quite underway, and the strategic risk at which the development world or the development challenges are changing, for instance, climate change, has increased twofold or threefold. So, so this requires us to also rethink our practice, the way we try to solve these problems. But we also, when we use the word problem, we need to understand that not all problems can be equally put into one ambit. Some are simpler, some are complicated, some are complex. Let me give you an example of a complex problem. Now, plastic waste management is a mammoth of a problem. It's a complex problem. For instance, one size fit all solution doesn't work. What might work in a smaller city might not work in a cosmopolitan. So it's a very complex problem. So when we're trying to bring policy solutions or infrastructural solutions or economic solutions or political solutions, or let's say environmental solutions to this kind of a complex problem, we need to we need to take a larger outlook at the problem from a systems lens, instead of just looking at from one linear way. For instance, some might say that, hey, why don't we do an incentive based program for people to start uh, putting in segregated waste in the bins right outside their homes, or whatever. This might work in a developed country or a country where people are more socially aware of this problem. But what about where out of sight and out of mind is a mental model which exists? So people don't care. They just put it in a single bin and they're gone and dusted. But whose real job is to really spot these these systemic challenges. The who has to spot these challenges? It's us, the first around us, the solutions around us, or the hypothesis, or the possible things which we can experiment on. Whose real job is to look around and finding those nuggets of weak signals, or those nuggets of smaller uh, possible solutions to these problems. When I say possible solutions, because I want you to take one step back and try to understand that we need to become a little more curious about these solutions and treat them as experiments or as prototypes, so that we just do not say that, okay, putting in a single bin system is the only solution. That might be a solution, tick box, but it needs to be accompanied with something else from multiple angles. Maybe a behavior change campaign needs to happen along. Maybe a systemic change in the municipality accountability system needs to be brought in. So it's also about our own mindset and the way we think beyond just one way, or the space of the obvious. You know, that's what I wanted you to believe in yourself, that you have the license to explore the futures. Then only you will be able to see the problems from multiple angles. Something which we've been taught, or somewhat our system pushes us towards, is to only function in the space of the obvious. My role in my organization, as well as an entrepreneur, or as someone who works in the innovation space, is to help push the boundaries, to think in the space of the unobvious. For instance, what a technology based accountability system might work for better waste management system. That's one way of I'm trying to question myself, to explore these futures, you know. And when you're trying to explore a future, you have to not just take, like, it's not about doing a one off let's say search event, or just one scanning of the of like you write it on Google and you're trying to find solutions, or you talk to one person. It's a continuous process. You're continuously on this hunt of scanning for those signals of change. Even if they're weaker in nature, you try to then build upon them. So it's a mindset that you need to be a little more sensitive to what's happening around you. And that might require you to zoom in and zoom out uh, on the problem surface. You know, like you might be, maybe your perspective is too zoomed in, like you're just focusing on the waste cycle. But maybe it's a policy challenge. Maybe it's the food grade packaging material which nobody was thinking about, but it lies somewhere in the periphery of the problem. But you need to zoom out and look at the system from a far angle as well. But you need to find that balance as well. I really like this reference, that let's say it's a big tank of water and it is leaking, and someone suggests just put a plaster on it, and it might solve the problem for a very short term period, that the water doesn't keep flowing out, but you're just doing a plaster on it. So it refers to plaster syndrome. You're not addressing the root cause of the problem, which is the hole itself, you know. So how do you work on creating a system or a systemic shift which is not just solved by one linear problem, or it's just not at the periphery of it you're solving, try to get to the problem, central to the problem, so that you're able to generate waves of change. This is another example where people say, let's get away from plastic straws, and maybe do bamboo straws or leaf straws. Yes, it's a brilliant solution, but does it solve the larger problem in the system? Okay, it might, but then you need to look at the accompanying solutions around it as well. So, my point is, and this is what I argue about, is that your prototypes or your portfolio needs to have this systemic lens, so you're able to generate enough momentum, so you're able to change the entire system. Now, this is a tall claim. How can we change the entire system? Uh, do we have the capacity to do everything? No. Do we have the capacity to map everything? No. But then when we say portfolio, I usually call it a portfolio of efforts, interventions, and experiments. Something might already be happening. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, you know. But then and then there are efforts happening around you, but then you need to find those white spaces around you which needs more attention, which needs resources for us to test those hypotheses. Like, as you can see, the complex systems are multi-pronged, are very difficult to handle, but then from within this stack of strings, we will try to find the ones which will have, when we start picking them up, will either ease the stack the most, or at least starts untangling it for us to start seeing the beyond the surface of the problem, so that we can work towards creating a set of interconnected interventions so that they can learn from each other. So they're symmetrical, or at least we can generate enough momentum within the system to learn from it. And when I was saying signals of change and emerging issues and trends, it's very important that we also try to understand the why. What is driving these changes, what are, and how do we stay true to this investigative depth, that when we're trying to understand the futures, we're also mindful of the bigger why. And I'll show you in an example how we have been using this iceberg diagram as well. So we explored a problem using multitude of methodologies, using systems mapping, ethnographic research, foresight. But then we go on to really understanding that is it a solution already proven? Okay, then if it is, then we just go and help scale it up. But if it is something which is a hypothesis or requires us to prototype or test, then we run these proof of concepts or pilots to evaluate and then validate them and then work towards scaling them up. Just let me give you an example of how we've been doing this. So Hushe Valley is one of the remotest valleys in Pakistan's north part of Pakistan, in Gilgit-Baltistan, where 90% of the people live under the poverty line, and access to resources is a huge challenge. We went on to understanding the system, we went on to learning from those people, and we found that food system came out to be a strong linkage with the socioeconomic challenges of these people, because most of their livelihood depended on food. So we kind of started mapping different personas. We started understanding, okay, how food plays a role in different challenges within the valley. Like, it links to water, it links to irrigation, it links to productivity, it links to market linkages. So then we saw, okay, how can we leverage food systems to solve their problems? Then multitude of hypotheses were found. Maybe we need to create some educational opportunities, maybe some entrepreneurial opportunities, maybe value add to their current products. So we kind of not limited ourselves to just one way of thinking. We saw the portfolio from multiple angles, but these are just hypotheses right now, right? We then started mapping those hypotheses against the food system, and then we started bringing together a portfolio. Now, the portfolio itself of experiments and interventions and efforts kind of work on five multiple angles: community initiatives, small, medium initiatives, large scale initiatives. Is it a service? Is it a regulatory prototype or an experiment we need to do? So that we start looking at things from an interconnected systemic level. And then we start mapping, and this is how we come up with a portfolio that maybe we need to do a pasta plant, maybe we need to do something around apricots, maybe we need to give laptops to the women there to sell their handicraft, maybe we need to create a audiovisual storytelling production so they can reach better marketing strategies to reach or penetrate into the market. So you see how we are trying to put a socio-economic problem in the center and trying to solve it from multiple angles, ranging from technology to economy to politics to food to women empowerment to gender and all, so that we are able to generate at least enough systemic impact together. And while we're doing this, we're also mindful of that some might become a very micro portfolio of experiments. Some might seem a smaller one, some might seem larger one. So, but the idea is that when we are generating a portfolio of experiments, we're also generating a movement around it. The movement's idea is that we also advocate alongside, so we are able to generate enough transition within the portfolio. So it's not just us. When I was saying that it's not one person's duty or one organization's duty, when you're working with multiple stakeholders, you're also generating voice and advocacy alongside as well in form of a movement. Now, this is a new concept in development where instead of doing one linear project, let's say for 5 years, you try to do multiple projects together, trying to solve one problem and then moving forward. I'll stop here now, and maybe Henry, you can ask questions and we can tackle this more there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think this idea of a systems approach, absolutely spot on, and I like your idea of avoiding sticking plaster solutions. One thing I'd like you to expand on maybe is that if you're looking for ultimate drivers of problems, this tends to get to how the system is organized, and there tend to be quite powerful interests, i.e. the people who are benefiting from how the system is currently organized, who will likely act as blockers to any significant change, in that, fundamentally, these are political systems. How do you deal with that, and what sort of experience have you? Presumably some of your ideas have been blocked as just not acceptable. How do you manage the power dimensions of change?
Sure. That's a very valid question, Henry. So when we're doing the portfolio, we are mindful of that some would be quick wins, some might require us to do more of a power dynamic kind of a advocacy game here. Maybe the government, for instance, in the plastic one, we started with this larger question that in Pakistan, a blanket ban on single-use plastic was announced by the policymakers and the government, but it didn't go well because of the way it was done. Because it was announced one day and the blanket ban was done, but people, the industry depended on it, many other partners depended on it, so that we wanted them to take a phased approach. But then, as my organization, we need to take more of a neutral role. We have to at times be an advocate from both sides. So it becomes difficult. I'm not saying it's easy. The portfolio gets challenged, but the idea is to also take those partners in confidence. So instead of bombarding the whole portfolio on the government partners or the policymakers in one go, try to also show them the quick wins within your portfolio so they understand the value of the work you're doing, but also have a neutral voice instead of just, like, for instance, in our plastics work, we work with Unilever very closely, and Unilever globally is known to be a big polluter. But then as a development partner and as an industry partner, if we don't come together, we won't be able to create a systemic change. So have a voice of your own as well when you're developing these portfolios, but do not shut yourself completely, that you cannot work with a certain partner or another partner just because your values don't align. You might have to work with those people, only then you'll be able to generate the systems change. But yes, things do get chased down, or uh, people do have a strong opinion on few parts of the portfolio work you're doing. But that's the part of the challenge of the development sector, that then you advocate for it, or at least try, or maybe rethink. Since we're entrepreneurs, so we then rethink the way, how do we pitch it again to those partners who are trying to be difficult. But I would not completely say that you don't have to give up. You will have to find a way to work
Never
around it.
give up. Absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah,
suppose obviously in any society there will be groups who are trying to shift the power balance.
yeah.
Usually social movements, civil society organizations, and so on, that are trying to challenge the status quo. As part of the UNDP, are you able to work with those?
So we do. So one interesting bit about the accelerator lab within UNDP is that it is very external facing as well as internal facing. So I also work as a porous kind of a surface for the organization where we try to work with these non-traditional partners, people with voice, people with maybe a little hardline mandate as well, because it's as I just said, the idea is not to work with those traditional partners only, but open it up to these non-traditional voices as well. That might be startups, that might be social entrepreneurs, that might be CSOs, which are completely against plastic polluters, But then our role is to also give a platform for these all kind of multi-stakeholders to come together and at least voice their concerns to each other in a safe space setting. But then, as I said, we cannot exclude the industry or the private sector completely just because we have a CSO which is strongly against them. So we need to do that power balance as well while we're working with these multiple stakeholders.
Brilliant. We have a question from Nicolette. Do you also map the power relations to better understand how these might be disrupted?
Absolutely. So, as one of our strategies is to map the system, and in systems work, mapping the stakeholders, mapping the system actors, the power dynamics, uh, all that come into play. And we are very considerate of that. Let's say if even the government is a silent partner, it can completely kill our project when it gets activated, let's say 10 steps ahead. So we then have to be mindful of that from day one. We are advocating to the right set of stakeholders based on the power dynamics we have identified. And Nicolette, one other thing is that we are also very much into co-creation. So it's just not about us planning and then taking to the people or to the communities or to the government partners or to the private sector. We rather bring everyone together to co-create with us so that their voice is heard as per the power relations so that they don't feel left out.
Thanks very much, Nicolette. It's we were talking earlier about getting to the root of the problem, and at promoting economic pluralism, we think that the root of the problem is how we organize our economy around profit-driven, growth-driven, consumption-driven economic systems. Would you be able to challenge the way the economy is organized? Is that off limits, would you say?
It's not off limits. It is like, for instance, yesterday we were in our retreat for planning for the next 5 years for our country program, and green growth, circular growth, donut economy, blue economy, all these terms were there. But then I if I if I had the liberty to say, I didn't see that passion amongst everyone to move towards those. So it's not off limit, but I think the communities we are living in, especially Pakistan, it is where we are challenged with the very basic social needs and very basic economic needs. When we try to introduce these concepts, they become a little more alienated or are seen as more of Western concepts, whereas they are the need of the time. For instance, when I'm working with informal garbage pickers, they're a huge part of the circular economy game, right? They naturally have a role. We can think about how to formalize them or channelize them and many other ways. But when I when I bring the angle of green growth or circular economy angle to it, somehow the voice is not heard in the right corner. So it's not off limits. It's just about maybe the language which we use uh, is a challenge. So it may be the people who are preparing these portfolios or are working on these multiple solutions, the values need to align to this larger economic model which you're referring to, but not necessarily voice it out that way that you can scare off people from day one. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but it is a language challenge as well. So let's, for instance, with the private sector, when I say, 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 don't use this word. They often say don't use this word. But at the end of the day, they are paying for fixing the plastic waste problem as well, but they're a little scared from when we use the word extended producer responsibility. So it's also one way that we as development practitioners or social activists need to think that we don't have to scare off our our important stakeholders or powered stakeholders as well.
But that's the issue, isn't it? That
Yeah,
the powerful can determine the agenda, and you're in a
yeah,
position where you can't scare them off. Therefore, you said you need to get out of the obvious, but part of the break to getting out of the obvious ideas or solutions are a load of
correct.
people who are afraid and resist and don't want to talk about solutions which threaten them.
Which threaten them, but then that's also where you need to have the neutral voice. You will have, like, for instance, I'm an open advocate for uh, what the private sector is doing wrong in the plastic space, but I'm not closing my door to not work with them. So there's a difference. Keep your voice, stick to it, and advocate for the right change, but don't close your doors. That's the entrepreneurial spirit, the social entrepreneurial spirit I would advocate for. We can disagree on this, but that's my way of thinking. Yeah.
We've got another question from Nicolette, which follows on to this, really. In terms of, I suppose, the tension between those trying to sort of stick in the safe space where they have the power, and those who are challenging that power and challenging the narrowness of solutions. I mean, do you get pressure from the more powerful to not listen to exclude the parties who are seeking more radical change?
In my experience so far, nobody said that don't listen to them or don't do that. But yes, the one who has the power might, or the policy might, would try to influence the solutions by saying this might work or shrug that off or that. But that's when like, one way for us how we are trying to deal with it is that we have a technical group within our organization or from multiple organizations who then tries to evaluate the portfolio from that neutral angle, and we try to then say, no, it will work, let us test. The space which saves us from the pressure is that we are in that testing space, instead of we said telling them that, oh, absolutely this would work. We tell them, let us experiment and we will share the learnings with you. When we say learnings with you, it just helps us save save ourselves from that pressure a little, so that, okay, the scaling up, when it comes to scaling up, we will come back to you and share our learnings with you. So it just saves us a little. But so far in my experience in 2.5 years right now, this has not come as a too much of a big obvious problem where the power has come in to stop us. And it's also about the brand you're associated with. So UN system itself has a value and has a voice. But if it is a startup who is doing a portfolio logic on its own, might not have the resources on its own or the voice of its own. But then you keep on doing, let's say, linear solution you've planned on, but try to find a group which is mapping all of this together, so that you get more validation of your voice. But maybe the room I'm sitting in, the UN room, it is a completely different story. Maybe when I was a social entrepreneur and I was advocating for the same sticking plaster versus multiple solutions, someone might not listen to me, and that's a real reality. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Ehsan. We're just about coming to the end of the period we have, and I'm sure there's a lot more you could talk about. We will look to get some materials from you or links to put up under the recorded version of this, so people can explore more and find out more about your work, which sounds absolutely fascinating. So thank you very much for giving your time this morning.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thank you.